Thank you so much, and good morning and welcome. I am so pleased to be able to have this discussion this morning with two great panelists. I want to start with a video to introduce our first panelist, Rocky Dawuni. If we could roll that video. There is a great video, I promise.
African thriller,
one of the things that fascinated me about Rocky Dawuni was his blending of Afrobeat music with reggae.
You think they get no desire, more fire. Music on the radio, don't take them no higher. It's too late, none of them can stop us now.
Rocky is one of those people who refuses to be silent, whose music contains a vital message that is more necessary now in these troublous times than ever before.
We don't need no more trouble. What we need is love to guide and protect us on. If you hope good down from above, help the weak to get strong.
There's no more important force than music in awakening people, in touching them, inspiring them, and even empowering them. Music is the key to the soul, and Rocky's way of communicating through music awakens everybody around him.
We're here for a reason. We're here because the forces of destiny has brought us all together. We're here to make a pledge that we are that generation that is going to make that difference, right?
Rocky is igniting social change around the globe in ways that you cannot begin to imagine. Rocky was selected as a global spokesperson for the United Nations Foundation for the Alliance for Safe Cookstoves. He is going to be able, through his awareness building campaign, to possibly save the lives of hundreds, thousands, even millions of people.
Welcome, Rocky. Come on up. Have a seat.
Hi.
Please have a seat. And by way of introduction to our next panelist, Asna Towfiq, we'll learn a little bit more through this next video about the actual issue we're going to be talking about today, about clean cooking. So if you could roll that next video, please. I don't know if you can hear me. Do you have the next video?
Hi, I'm Julia Roberts. Did you know that one of the deadliest threats facing women and their families around the world today is right inside their own home? Would you believe that the simple act of cooking is responsible for 2 million deaths globally each year? This is because close to 3 billion people still rely on solid fuels, such as wood, to cook their food every day. When burned in open fires, these types of fuels emit a toxic smoke that fills homes and communities the world over. The good news is that there are solutions to address it, and I am proud to be part of an organization promoting the adoption of clean cookstoves and fuels for 100 million households around the world by 2020. The Global Alliance for Clean Cookstoves is working with its hundreds of partners to save lives, improve livelihoods, empower women, and combat climate change by creating a global market for clean cooking solutions. Clean cookstoves change lives. We can clean indoor air, reduce pollution and harmful emissions, and enable women and their children to live better lives. Join me in making this goal a reality.
And please welcome to the stage Asna Towfiq from Bangladesh. Welcome. Have a seat. So before we get started, I want to first thank all of you for being here. I don't know how much everyone in the room knows about this issue of clean cooking, but it is a drastically important issue that affects about half the world's population. I also want to thank our friends at McCann Health who helped bring this panel together and helped us think about how to get this conversation into Can Health and to think about discussing an issue and how we can affect behavior change in some really interesting and creative ways with a couple of very interesting and creative people. So Asna, you head up the Global Alliance for Clean Cookstoves efforts in Bangladesh. And I'm wondering if you could start us off this morning for this conversation with a description of the issue. Tell us more about what this whole conversation about clean cooking means and the goals of the Alliance.
So cooking is like an integral part of our lives, right? So we either eat to live or live to eat. Either ways, you have to cook 3 days a day or 4 days a day. Now, 4 times a day. But unfortunately, millions around the world still don't have access to a clean cook stoves or a clean fuel to cook. And they rely on traditional cook stoves and fuels, which cause immense health and environmental impacts. You know, just to give some statistics, 3 million people still rely on traditional stoves and fuels, and which causes, you know, immense health problems like pneumonia, asthma, even lungs cancer. Kind of affects childbirth. I mean, low birth weight for newborn babies. It also, you know, emits a lot of carbon, so it contributes to 25% of carbon emission globally as well. Just to give a context, I mean, if you imagine the person sitting in front of you, you know, smoking a cigarette, the person behind you burning a fuel, you know, someone on your right also smoking a cigarette, and you sit in that environment for hours, and you don't have ventilation, and you have to do it over and over again, you know, throughout your life. And smoking that air is so much harmful for your health and for everyone else. So that is exactly what we are trying to solve, this problem. The Global Alliance for Clean Cookstoves was launched in 2010 with the goal of reaching 100 million households by 2020. And we now have over 1,700 partners all over the world, and we have 8 focus countries, Bangladesh being one of them.
Excellent, thank you. So first of all, very complicated health problem, and it's, as you explain it and help us visualize it, you can really picture kind of why it is such a complex health problem. Can you just touch on the scale of the problem and the solutions that you're implementing again? So you said 3 billion people around the world are affected, and you're looking to reach 100 million households by 2020. So really impressive and lofty goals against a really important challenge. Yeah. And Rocky, so you are, for the Alliance, you serve as a global ambassador and use your voice and your platform and reach out to the people who listen to your music and who are so deeply intertwined with your talents. Tell us a little bit about why you got involved in this issue. Why did this touch you and what brought you to the Alliance?
Well, for me, you know, growing up in Ghana, you know, if anybody who knows my background is that when I was growing up, you know, the importance of being a voice and instrument for all the issues that I observed around, you know, my neighborhood was of immense importance to me, you know. And then as I attained the platform of music and the opportunity to also be able to communicate and connect with people, you know, I focused on, you know, issues from, you know, girl-child education to environment, you know, to really to empowerment of my community. And then one day I got a call, you know, about this issue. And from growing up too, you know, I come from a traditional home. So anytime I go to the village, you know, I see the village women, including my aunties, you know, like cooking in open fires and smoke, you know, but everybody's always so excited, you know, about the cooking that is happening that we never knew there was really a certain cost to it, you know. And then my father too was a cook in the army, you know, so cooking was also something too that was part of growing up. So when I found out that there was a certain, you know, this act that almost everybody around the world, you know, I mean, cooking brings people together. It's an occasion for celebration. But to know that it impacts and really affects the lives of people, I felt that there was a need for more voices to help to really bring this issue, you know, to a wider audience. And then secondly too, I also saw the opportunity that, you know, clean cooking and cook stoves was also solving a lot of the issues that I was working on. You know, first of all, the gender issues that I was working on in terms of, you know, gender equalization. the model for clean cooking also included empowerment of women. So I saw this as a big plus. And then using clean cook stoves to, first of all, it reduced the amount of energy that was used, and also you used cleaner options, which was environmentally very relevant for me and all the work that I was doing on the environment. So I saw this as a proactive way, like a creative solution to a whole lot of issues, and also a sort of disruption, that we were taking something that was so basic and widespread and turning it into a new means by which we could solve these issues by making everybody who adopts a clean cook stove, voting or contributing to solving these issues. So for me, it was just, I think it found me. The issue really found me. Yes.
I love that. It's
yes.
a great. It's great to hear how you think about it as cutting across so many different issues that you were already working on and passionate about in your own life. In the way that you talked about the fact that you get when you see people cooking, you see your family cooking or your neighbors, and there's excitement about that food and about the opportunity to dine together and break bread together, and that's such an important part of life, of a family, of a culture, of a community. But you may not know that there are also negative impacts. That actually, that's part of the theme that we brought with us today, where there's fire, and that the implication being, of course, there's smoke also, and there can be negative impacts of that smoke. And so that actually brings me back to you, Asna, and thinking about how you address that issue and that is very, you're talking about people's culture and their livelihood and how they do things. So how do you go about that in a place like Bangladesh, where you're actually thinking about how do we get people to take on this challenge in a kind of a behavior change communications type of model?
I think it's extremely challenging, to be honest. And in a country like Bangladesh, there's almost 30 million households who do not have access to a clean cooking solution. But cooking is something that's so integral to their tradition and culture. Women in villages in Bangladesh, they build their own stoves. It's a matter of pride that I have made my own mud stove. So you can't go into her house and tell her that the stove you're using is kind of killing you, So, they will be like, what are you saying? I made this out of love and passion. So you really have to think about changing their behavior. And that is what the Alliance has been trying to do. The Alliance has a market-based approach, and we have started our behavioral change communication work from 2015. And in 2016, we did a couple of small-scale campaigns in different countries, including Bangladesh. And the goal was really to show people that there are different solutions that you can use, which will solve this problem. But the challenge, again, there is that different country cooks different kind of food. So that, has a different kind of fuel. Some countries like, Ghana, Kenya, you will see charcoal used a lot. You go to India and Bangladesh, you will see a lot of wood fire and cow dung being used. So you need to really customize the solution that you're giving and the kind of messages and promotion work that you're going to do.
So, really helpful overview. I'm wondering if you can take a bit of a deeper dive. I know you've been doing recently a campaign where you're actually out in communities and really trying to get people involved in learning more. Can you tell us a little bit about that and some of the results you've seen?
So, over years, health was the major focus for promoting cook stoves. It's not that, the Global Alliance for the first time is doing cook stoves. There were projects and programs even before. That has been going on for years, from 1980s and all. But health was the major focus for most of those campaigns. So when we started our behavioral change communication work, we did a lot of studies and group sessions and tried to understand really what inspires a consumer in the village of Bangladesh to buy something. With that minimum income, how would they really spend $15 or $10 on a stove? It really has to have the demand pull. And that is what we tried to create in all of these markets that we did these campaigns, really create that pull for cook stoves. So in Bangladesh, it was very interesting that we see that the economy is growing at a fast rate, about 6%, 7% GDP growth rate. So everyone is aspiring to be modern, and everyone wants to be cool and have access to new technologies and just just go with the flow of globalization, I guess. So we started doing a lot of studies, and what we found is how we can really position Cookstoves as an aspirational product. So what we tried to tell the consumers is, times have changed, change your stove. So you're being modern, you're using a smartphone, you have, new technologies in your homes, you're wearing new clothes, but your kitchen and the way you're cooking is still, really, really old-fashioned. So why don't you change that, and that will benefit your family and the community as well. And the results were quite amazing. We did this campaign in Bangladesh for 3 months. We did a lot of street theaters, mobile cinema shows, mobile SMS, fairs, and sales went up. We saw almost 60% of sales going up, and another about 30% of the population said that they had a higher intention to purchase a stove in the next 3 or 4 months.
Excellent, thank you. I love this idea that, working in the nonprofit sector, the cause sector, and for an NGO, that it's important to think about reaching people, not necessarily because it's good for you, but because it's the thing that makes you cool or modern or hip and brings you to a new culture. Is an very interesting twist. I think a lot of times in the nonprofit world, we are very guilty of constantly telling people, well, there's a moral imperative here, or you should be doing this because it's good for you. And sometimes people they want dessert sometimes, not always vegetables, right? So sometimes you sell them vegetables and or sell them dessert and hide the vegetable in there, I guess, right? Yes. So Rocky, if you could talk a little bit about how you've seen your voice and the way that you've used your platform to talk to people. How have you seen it help change this issue and the way people are thinking about it and talking about it?
Well, I think the important thing is that, when people see your commitment to an issue, especially my audience, first of all, there's a certain level of curiosity, and when I am involved in an issue, and especially an issue like the cook stove, what I do is that during my concerts, and also media appearances, I utilize the opportunity to really explain to people and try to give people the reason why I'm involved in it and the reason why they should also take a look at it, and then after that too, what I do is that I have also made efforts to travel into various communities. So, for example, about a year ago when I was on tour in Rwanda, I took it upon myself to travel to the Gihembe Refugee Center, where I was hosted by United Nations UNHCR folks there, and to meet the women there, because the women were all fleeing from the war in Congo. And one of the important things was to really see how, their situation in terms of how they cooked for their families. And in doing so, I was really, I found out about, the problems that they were facing, being there and then also trying to, go to the neighboring communities to fetch firewood, and the issues, the pressures that, the neighborhood too was feeling like they were encroaching on their space, and all these tensions, So, and that information, when I came, we did a huge social media campaign around it. Pictures and all the work that's, in terms of the words of the women, we showed their kitchens. And so I utilize all those media that I have access to and with my engagement to present it. And then once I present it, then my audience too are able to take that issue too and then go out and spread it. So it's all a matter of being able to leverage my platform, and as a musician to the ability to engage people in a deeper way and be able to create lines of communication for them to honestly give me feedbacks to help me to gather the right data that I'm able to, help me to communicate better. Yes.
Excellent. Yeah. This guy he's the real deal. He doesn't just kind of swoop in and talk about an issue. The first time we had a planning call for this session to think about what we would discuss, he couldn't actually be on the call because he was in North Carolina for a music festival, and while he was there, he decided he should meet with a 3rd grade class of 8-year-olds and talk about how music can have a social impact and how kids can use their voice to try to change the world?
Well, for me, the thing is that we all have the ability to be instruments of change, and I think that all of us, creative folks here, in my tradition in Africa, we believe that when you're given a gift and you're able to use that gift for something higher than yourself, like impacting other people's lives, then you leave a legacy, of impacting, social change. So for me, the greatest legacy I can leave is how I affect other people's lives. And in every day, in my music, in my, when even I'm in a place to do a concert, I try as much as possible to find the space to engage the community one way or the other and try to point to them everybody's obligation to their community. And in doing so too, I open the way for other people to ask me about the interests, the things that I'm interested in, so that I can be able to communicate back to them. So it's a matter of all of us, stepping up to the plate and understanding that if we put our talents to helping elevate our community in the long run, we elevate the rest of the world.
Amen. Yes. Amen. So Asna, you talked a little bit about some of the work in Bangladesh and going into communities. Can you walk us through that? I know I have not been a part of a campaign like that. I'm guessing a lot of people in the room haven't. What does that look like? How do you talk about some festivals and fairs as a way to reach people, and then you also had some data points that if you could maybe walk us through how those actually changed some of the perceptions. But just paint a picture for us. What does that look like, and how do you go about measuring those data points?
To begin with, when we started designing the campaign, we had to come up with of course, campaign look and feel and campaign name and all that. So it was very interesting because everything was kind of evidence-based. So we had to, collect data from the field and then do pre-testing and all that. So the campaign was called Modern Stoves, and the tagline was "Times have changed, change your stove." And it targeted both male and female, because in Bangladesh, the males actually have the decision-making power because they are mostly the bread earners. So we were talking to both men and women, but probably had different messages for the two groups. So for instance, in the mobile movie that we showed, who is a modern man? Is it someone who wears fancy clothes and has an iPod and listens to music and is very cool? Or is it someone who's he's doing good in his life and also takes care of his families, And we tried to show the relationship of two brothers in that movie, and we also had the problem that the family was facing in their kitchen, and how the older brother buys a new stove, and they have the mother has more time now to spend with her family and all that. We also did a lot of street theaters, which were like colorful folk music, kind of local music and local cultural street theater. And then we did a lot of fairs, which all these stove manufacturers, they participated in the fairs, and consumers could come and buy the stoves and see the stoves, and there were a lot of demonstrations. Because one of the things that we are seeing increasingly is that when consumers actually look and see the products, kind of do a test, they get more interested to buy them, because otherwise this is kind of technology that people are not aware of, as of yet. A lot of people don't know about improved cook stoves yet. So when you show them how it works, you make them more interested. We also had a lot of support from the government in Bangladesh, and we were very lucky that they sent out this free SMS, all over Bangladesh. About 15 million people received that SMS, which basically endorsed the campaign. And they shared like the helpline number and the Facebook link on that message, and told people that you should use a modern stove to, for better livelihood of your mother and families. And that really did give a big boost to the entire campaign, and there was like a lot of phone calls on our helpline, and severe flow in the social media as well. And we also did like a lot of videos on social media. We did like interactive conversations. People could also place an order of a stove on the social media, and we did do quite a good number of sales through that channel as well. So I think overall we used different channels to reach the audience. And then we did some surveys to understand how this is working. So we did and pre and post event surveys. So when consumers or households would come to say a fair, we would ask them how much do you know about modern stoves? Do you know about the health impacts of cooking in traditional stoves and all that? There was a very short 5 or 6 questions. And then after, when they were leaving the fair, we would ask them again. So, what do you know about modern cook stoves now? And we saw almost like a 90% increase in awareness and knowledge about this technology. And then we also collected mobile numbers from the door-to-door visits that we did, or from these fairs. And then after the campaign, we made a survey and we called all these numbers and asked them, have you bought a stove? What did you think about the campaign? Or do you have a complaint about the campaign or the product? Even, there were some obviously issues about, the after-sale service was not good. Or I ordered a stove a week back, I don't have it yet. So there was issues, of course, working on the supply side is another angle altogether. But I think overall there was a lot of increase in knowledge and there was a lot of intention to purchase in the stoves.
Excellent, thank you. So really interesting to think about. You've got a cultural challenge to overcome, that you've got people who have literally made their own stoves, and then you're trying to educate them that maybe this actually isn't the best option for you and your family. Trying to overcome that barrier through really an integrated campaign. It sounds like you have films, you're out in communities doing community activations, SMS that broadcast to a major portion of the population of the country, social media integration, and then you're also measuring all that through surveys, et cetera. And then you have this added complication that you're not marketing a stove, right? You're working with, because you're representing a sector, working with how many manufacturers or how many companies?
We had 6 companies in this campaign.
Okay, so six companies, and you're marketing the idea of the modern stove, and then in that you've got 6 different companies who are selling a stove. So very complicated, complex set of interactions, but a really creative and integrated approach. Really interesting, I think, for this group. Rocky, I wanted to turn to you and talk a little bit about, for this audience, there was actually an interesting article about that we were sharing amongst ourselves yesterday about how there's more entertainment and more artists integrated into Cannes this year than in the past, and lots of brands thinking about how they work with artists like yourself. At the same time, the nonprofit world is also having, and the cause world is having that same kind of conversation. How do we effectively work with artists to bring our issue to their voice? What advice would you give for the creative folks in the room? What's the best way to work with people like yourself?
Well, I think that, it's long overdue. I mean, it's already been happening in certain ways, but I feel now we live in a time when, we have so many tools of dissemination, of communication, social media and, the internet. And so, first of all, artists have always had the ability to engage people and communicate. And then brands also are looking for the opportunity to communicate with people. And I think artists become the bridge, first of all, not only to be the face of the brand, but also to help really communicate what the brand is trying to get across to the people. And I think that even a better way, there's even a much more bigger opportunity where artists can even step into the corporate social responsibility aspect of a lot of these brands, because apart from him using his image or his influence or social media, if there's even a step taken further where he articulates how the brand is going to really impact and affect the lives of people, then you're creating, champions to champion the brand. And once you have one person who believes in a brand totally, they become the voice in the community to really spread that. So I think that this is an important moment. But I believe that there is, both sides have to now try to innovate and take that collaboration to a whole nother level where it's not necessarily just appearing at events that a brand is doing, sing one song, make a few moves and leave. But then you're integrated into ultimately the communication and messaging that the brand is trying to get across to people. And And then in the long run too, I feel that artists also, the business has changed a lot, in terms of the music business. So the channels of, whereby you could, when you put out a new album, how you could get it to the audience too has dwindled, because first of all, the internet provides a lot of opportunity to spread music out, but at the same time too, it's increased the competition of being heard. So aligning with a brand, which is recognizable too, helps the artist also create that stand out, really stand out of the crowd. And so it's a two-way street. And I think that once it's very, we keep focusing on it, there's going to be a lot more innovations in that sector as to how we can communicate. But I just think that it is really a very good thing that's happening right now.
Okay, good. I like this idea of a two-way street, that it can be beneficial for the brand or the cause. It can also be beneficial for the artist. It's really interesting. Maybe we could talk a little more about that and think about in your own life. I think there's a real level of authenticity to you being involved in a lot of the issues that you've talked about today, and particularly with this issue of clean cooking. Can you talk about how you think about yourself and why this cause matters so much to you, how you've internalized that and how that's part of who you are?
Well, for me, the thing is, it comes from my intention to make a difference. My mission to use my music to, really impact people's lives and also be an instrument of social change. So the cook stove concept for me works right within that philosophy. So it makes it much more, when I go into, the community, or I'm on stage or through my social media, it's something that really feeds into the philosophy of what I'm trying to project in the world, And I think that people too, because I come from a position where I believe in what I do, and I think that I jump on issues because I believe that I can be able to contribute that. So with my work with the cook stoves, it really cuts across as an authentic voice that is really pushing across an issue that is really real, and that, I believe, makes people pay attention to it. Yeah.
Great, thank you. So Asna, you talked us through a lot of the work that you're doing and leading in Bangladesh, which is incredible. The Alliance obviously has multiple different countries that you're working in around the world, with several of those being focus countries. Maybe you could tell us about some examples in some of the other focus countries that the Alliance is really paying attention to, because there are different kind of work happening in different places, right? So maybe you could talk us through some of that.
The Alliance has 8 focus countries. Bangladesh, India, China, Ghana, Kenya, Nigeria, Guatemala, and Uganda. And we ran these campaigns in 4 of these countries. Besides Bangladesh, we did the campaign in Guatemala, in Kenya, and Uganda. And now we're also doing work in Nigeria. To give some examples, I think in Guatemala, it was very interesting that they used radio as a means of communication. And they had a soap opera. It was a series, I think 12 series that they did. And it was so interesting that it started interacting with the consumers. So there was, of course, radio show, and there was, call-ins and SMS on the show. But it was interesting how they really, how do you show a cook stove on a radio program? How do you, it's so hard to visualize. But they had a very nice story which was centered around, women cooking in the house and the problems and all. But they also kind of linked it with the social media. So in the Facebook, they would have, posters of that soap opera. And at the end of the campaign, they did, the final episode was a live show. So it was like a stage show where all the characters came in, and they did the finale of that show. And, consumers and listeners could actually also see the characters they were hearing all this time on the radio, and they also saw the products and everything. So it was very interactive. In Ghana, we did a lot of work with the Girl Guides. We engaged the Girl Guides and used them to promote. Because school education and awareness creation for young children is also important, because how they can influence their parents is amazing. In Kenya and Uganda, they also did a lot of branding around creating a category of products again and creating a name for that category. So you see a symbol and you know that it relates to clean cooking. And it's not easy because it's something very new. So it also has to compete with everything else that's going on, and then kind of also stand out, and also kind of bring out the issues and the importance of this issue. So I think all of these campaigns were really interesting. And moving on, now we're doing some more work. We're doing a campaign in Nigeria which focuses more on using LPG in Nigeria for cooking, and how that can save time and make women more empowered. We're doing similar work in Kenya as well. We're also doing a TV show in Kenya where they're going to show cook stoves and like a cooking show, and show different kind of stoves and its impacts. And also in Bangladesh, we're carrying on with our behavioral change campaign. Yeah.
Excellent. So the more you talk, the more I realize how complex this is, because you're talking about a public health issue, but you're treating it in many ways. You're not representing a company or manufacturer, but you're treating it in many ways like selling a commercial product and trying to not only create or spur along a market, but create a new category in many places. And then, of course, you have the added challenge that you're working across different cultures, where all of both the methods of communications are different, but the styles of cooking are different. So it's a really interesting and complex challenge, which I'm sure a lot of people are interested in digging their teeth into. So I'm glad that you are, and glad that you've got a great group of colleagues who are doing it. Rocky, I love hearing your story and hearing about the ways that you're engaged. You're a Grammy award-winning, internationally known star. You don't have to do any of this, right? You could travel around making music. What keeps you motivated to stay so involved and to keep really using all of your time and talents and opportunities to try to affect this and other causes?
Well, I sometimes, I've had, situations where in between records, my fan base has been waiting for a record, and then all of a sudden they see me traveling around, working on social issues. So I'll get like emails like, hey, stop roaming around and focus on the record, stuff like that, But for me, it's just my belief that if I am able to, utilize, that medium to, impact, what happens is that I also inspire other musicians and other voices to be able to, also contribute to changing, issues that we feel needs to be addressed, And in Ghana, one of the things that I used to actually do, I did a yearly festival, and every artist in Ghana always wanted to, every year for an artist to even break out, you had to play on that festival. So by then I was also collaborating with UNICEF on water issues, and also clean, what's called guinea worm eradication program. So every artist that was booked on the show, I took them along for 1 week to go onto the fields and go and meet the communities and engage the communities, and in doing so too, inspire those artists to also adopt that means of, add that dimension to their craft. Because growing up in Africa, there's so many issues. When you walk around, you realize that there's so many issues that need attention. And a lot of times people outsource it to the government or outsource it to other people to take control. But I feel that we have to take control. But for us to take control too, there has to be voices too who people respect, who have to take that initiative in order to inspire, a generation to do that. And then as an artist too, my lyrics and my music speaks about empowerment and elevation of people and positive change. So I always have looked out for how I can also take those lyrics and those beliefs and create a mechanism to put those ideas into action. And that led me to also collaborating with a lot of multilateral organizations, because I felt that they were doing the work on the ground. So if I bring my audience and my voice and my my platform to contribute to helping them spread the word and also communicate it in a way, then one way or the other I also achieve those aspirations of trying to realize a tangible way of bringing my music on the ground. And then it also it's also a soul thing, because for me, I grew up in an environment where I believe that you're your brother's keeper. So we all have to, when I go out there and I feel that I have been able to, I'm not only talking about issues, but I'm also on the ground making sure that it happens. It gives me the lyrics and also the inspiration to also go back, and when I stand on stage and sing those lyrics, there is a ring of authenticity, not only behind the words, but also within me, myself. So there is, there's a personal reason, and at the same time too, a public reason for that.
So I love this idea, and I think you've come back to it a couple of times, that there's a benefit for you personally, for you as an artist, and also for the issue that you're working on. That it's a win-win-win,
Yes.
And it helps you in your career. And I also really part of what I hear in what you're saying is this importance of depth, that in working with an artist, that there's an authenticity that comes from a depth of knowledge about the issue and really interacting with the issue and understanding it in a deeper way, which I think we don't see enough of, frankly, in the world. Unfortunately, you do oftentimes see people who kind of swoop in, play a couple songs at an event, and then leave, and that's important. It helps draw attention. It can have, there's a place for that in the world. But this idea of a deeper engagement, I think, is really interesting.
And also, I think that a lot of issues too, especially within the public health sector, are steeped in culture. And artists, we kind of operate within the cultural realm. So if you have a sensitivity or understanding of a culture, you're able to create channels of communication that no amount of media or no amount of there's a unique bond that you create with the people. So you're able to gain their trust, because when they see you on the ground, leaving what you do and coming and be focused on what they're working on, there's a certain bond that is created, and that is that bond that I feel is sacred, and I can use that pathway to communicate with them, to let them know that I am on their side, and I'm also coming there not in terms of pointing to them what is right or wrong, but to be with them and walk along with them towards a solution. So I feel that that is something that artists have, and I tend to always use that to for all the initiatives that I believe in.
Excellent. Well, a year ago at Cannes, I believe it was last year at Cannes, there was a commitment made by multiple holding companies that own much of the advertising industry space, and these companies committed to supporting the Sustainable Development Goals that were set forth by the United Nations, by member countries of the United Nations, where all the nations of the world agreed to try to achieve 17 big goals by 2030 that are really ambitious goals, like eliminating poverty, eliminating hunger, providing quality education for everybody, and gender equality, et cetera. And so these companies have said they would align to helping drive those goals and use their platforms to do that. So this year we'll hear more about some of the work that's being done. But I think there's also an opportunity here with your work, Asna, and the work of the Alliance, because I believe that working on clean cooking kind of touches on about 10 different SDGs. So maybe we'll probably close here with this question, looking at the time. But as people leave, what can they do? How can people here today help and support the work that you're doing or the work of the Alliance?
I think we have reached a point where in 2017 iPhones have become a necessity. And yesterday when I was at the awards show and looking into some of those brilliant campaigns, I was just saying, you know, campaigns for Alzheimer, pneumonia, anti-smoking campaigns and all that. And I was thinking that we need one of those for clean cooking, you know. And that is, I think, what we need from the people in this room. I mean, this is the creative mind. This is where it all happens. And we need these creative, fresh ideas to come into the sector. Because at the end of the day, it is really about creating that awareness and creating the pull for the products. You know, whether it's a social good, whether, you know, it does a lot of, you know, great impacts on humanity. But at the end of the day, your consumers really have to want that product and buy it and use it at their homes. And I think that is where this group of people can really work for this cause and, you know, help us, you know, reach out to the consumers and those households more.
Excellent. So you heard it here. If you have a company that is looking for a way to work on a really interesting commercial need in the world and also at the same time help drive social change, come talk to Asna. She'll be here right after this event. And actually in multiple countries too. So if you're with an agency that has a footprint in multiple countries and multiple geographies around the world, here's a great opportunity for you. Thank you very much for being here today. Huge thanks to Rocky Dawuni and Asna Towfiq for their great insights. And thank you. I think with that, we're wrapped. I appreciate it. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you.